I'm very happy for you to just kind of walk us through, maybe telling me a little bit about the story that you're working on now, how it's going to be.
Well, it's going to start off really pretentious because I was in Morocco. But again, we were talking about that earlier, my trip when I went for my 50th, when I went everywhere.
Yes.
France, England, Spain, and I went down to Morocco. And so I'm just sitting in the bar in the Riyadh, which, as you do.
Yes, yes.
And I was sitting down there with my notebook, and I was a little tired of, it's like when you go on a trip, I gotta see this, I gotta see this. Yeah. I gotta go out every day, it's exhausting.
It is, yeah.
So I just decided to stay in, and these young college girls, American girls, 19, 20,
yeah,
floated into the bar loudly, as 19, 20-year-old girls do.
Yes.
And shopping was so good.
Right.
And it was like, let's get a beer. And so it's a group of girls. I think it was probably about 4 or 5 of them. And one was a mixed race girl. Yeah. She looked like Lisa Bonet.
Okay.
I don't know how old you are to know.
Oh, of course I know.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
May not know, but so she came in, beautiful girl, and a bunch of other white women, and and they all got their drinks loudly, and she's just like, and so it was beautiful. Like there's tables, there's the bar, and then there's just this pit with these pillows and these, and she's like, and the other girls went and sat there, and she's like, why are we sitting over there? Yes. Let's sit over there.
Yes.
Over?
Yes. Yes.
And she's just like, why is it sitting over there?
You're missing it. Yeah.
And they're just ignoring her. Right. And I'm just, me being the, let's go with writer that I am rather than Snoop. And I'm just watching and listening and, making opinions, which are my own. And I'm watching, and it's like, they're just ignoring her. Like she's not there. Mm-hmm. Like she's invisible.
Yeah.
And it would be, I'm assuming, way more fun over there in the pit than to sit on these hard chairs.
Yes.
But they're ignoring her and whatever, and she's just like, and she's holding her beer, trying to get them to come over, and then they all sit down.
Right.
And it seemed like one was the ringleader.
Right.
And they all sat down, so she just gave up and came back and sat with them.
Yeah.
And they're talking, and she'd say something, and the one girl would just like, blatant. Blatant.
Yes.
And I'm just like, come here, baby, and sit with me.
Yeah.
Come sit with me.
Yes.
I want to know who you are.
Yes.
And it's just like, I'd say mother instinct, but I don't have kids. But, just auntie wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just, so I started thinking about this girl.
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen? How did she grow up that she doesn't know that she's the prize?
Yes.
They see that she's the prize. And this is why the one girl is, I made up a whole scenario.
Yeah.
Is chopping her down.
Yes.
And doesn't want her to shine. And doesn't want her to see how beautiful and how brilliant and how smart
yes.
she is. And so it's like, okay, this is... So I started calling her Bonet.
Okay, yes, yes.
That's where the name came from, because that's who she looked like for me. And then I just started writing this scenario. This is what happens when you grow up feeling invisible.
Yes.
This is what happens. So that's where the story started. That's one of the first scenes in the book.
Mm-hmm.
This is where it started. So how did this girl get to that point at 18, 19?
Mm-hmm. How did she become invisible?
Exactly. And how did she grow up not seeing that her voice was just as strong, or if not stronger, than everybody else's?
Yes.
So that's where it came from. Her name is now Borno.
Okay.
Because that was my favorite neighborhood in Spain. The Alhorn had the best market, even though they overrated the other one. I ate so much fish.
Right?
It was embarrassing. I have no shame. And the other one was just overrated, overpriced.
Yes.
And
Borno, I'm going to remember.
Yes. Okay. So that was her nickname.
Okay.
Gabriella is her real name.
Beautiful.
So then, I started collecting pictures of her, who I thought she was. That's what remember I showed you that picture? That's her.
Yes.
That's her when she figures out who she was and growing into herself. And,
Yes.
So I just started writing from there, trying to figure out then who are her parents?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What kind of imaginary people raise a child that this is, where would she grow up?
Right.
So that's where the story came from. So then her mom is Lynette, who is a mixed race bisexual woman.
Yes. Yes.
Probably the one I knew the most about.
Yes.
Anybody want to tell the story on camera?
Tell it.
When I was in Barcelona, there was this. I saw the most beautiful man I've ever seen. I am,
Yes.
I'm not on that side of the team, but I considered for a good 30 seconds.
He was that beautiful.
Kemi?
Wow.
And I just and then you start thinking, what would happen if I know who I am and I jumped the line and fell in love and followed this through? Who would this person be? What would their marriage be?
Yes.
What would their bond be?
Wow. Okay.
Right? Was that pretty?
Wow.
Let me tell you.
Muse.
Oh, yes. Europe is a whole different world.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Morocco is a whole different world.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah.
But so it's just it's just imagination. What if somebody like me met the man of their dreams?
Yes.
What did that look like? What if they had children?
Right.
So that was Mateus.
Okay.
He looked like a Mateus.
Right?
Of course he did. And she was Lynette.
Okay.
And so
wow.
That's Borno's mother and father. And Borno, because she met him in the Alborn.
Yes.
All people name their children.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I mean, her given name is Gabriella because he's Spanish.
Yeah.
She's Canadian, came over. Right?
Yes.
So that's how. So if they had this attraction, this love, how could anybody, including their child, get in there? Right? Like, how is that? Right? So how does a child grow up in that family?
Right.
And be a person that is seen when they're used to not being seen. And then it came down to, okay, it's a girl. What if it was a boy? Would it be different? And I don't know the answer. This is what the book is exploring.
Okay.
Is it different? Would it be different as a boy versus a girl?
Right. each other. So it's like you'd have the scene with them in the living room and they're doing whatever. And in this scene, she chokes on a olive because she's just wandering around and they're so into each other that they don't see her. And she's wandering around the room and she chokes. And, things happen and she doesn't die, obviously. But, and he chokes, so just different reactions. So it's like when she's crawling around, he's crawling around, but she'll crawl out of the scene and he'll crawl into the scene. Wow.
And then do the same scene with different reactions or same reactions, depending on
whatever happened.
Yes.
Just writing it to see if there's a difference.
And all the different threads and possibilities.
Exactly. Boy, girl.
Yeah.
They're both artists.
Yes.
You know, but different kinds of art. You know, just to see how he developed, how she developed.
Yes.
At one point I thought, maybe it's a transgender person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it didn't seem to go that way.
Okay. Because in some ways it has that aspect of almost seeming like an, I don't want to say allegory, but...
Yeah, but...
Yeah.
But inside your... And
there seems to be that exploration.
Yeah. But it didn't seem to be that.
Right.
And I didn't think... And that could just me pulling myself out of the story, but it's like, do I know enough to write that? Is it my place to write that?
Yes.
And I did, like, in the process of this, I sent a whole bunch of emails to friends and family. Do you feel invisible? Tell me a time when you felt invisible. Interesting, I didn't get a lot of response. Oh, I'll get to that. Which I thought was interesting. A friend that was trans answered. And it just didn't... It's yes, but I didn't think that was where I was going.
Okay.
So I thought that was a different story to follow.
Yeah.
Than where I thought I was going.
Right.
So it is an interesting story.
Very interesting, yeah.
It is
because it's like the exploration is definitely there, and then I wonder, you know, as artists, you know, whatever your medium is, whether it be the written word or dance or film, like there is that element of, you know, your intention and what's behind it when you create something, and then how it's received and read by the person that's kind of like bearing witness or like
I thought that was a bigger story than I was giving it. And I just thought I didn't want to just, in this, check that box.
Yes.
Because it deserves way bigger than that.
Yeah.
And a whole level of understanding that I don't have right now that I would have to do to get there.
Yes.
And that's not where I was going in this.
And so it's kind of like writing from a place that you know. That
I know. Exactly. And that I understood.
Yes.
Mostly understood.
Yes.
Right? So,
yes.
You know, there's a whole bunch, it surprises me too, but there's a whole bunch more to learn and to go, but from the base that I'm starting at.
Yeah.
That's a bigger.
Yeah.
So.
Well, fascinating. And the other thing is I remember you saying that, and I don't know if you finished this story or it's still a work in progress, we were talking about superpowers and supernatural, which kind of comes up in your work, like from Sophia Firecracker to this story, like the idea of the superpower and attaching being invisible to that. Like a theoretical underpinning, if you will. Like there's like something underneath your work that then these various stories emerge, but definitely that idea of like superpowers, superheroes, and things
show
like
you
that.
My superpowers in that?
No.
Not on camera.
But I believe it. I want to see that. Yeah, and so, you know, I'm curious, like, if that's something that's remained in this story, or is that something that you also moved away from?
I think that my true belief is that invisibility is a superpower, along with flying. And Wonder Woman had an invisible plane.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a superpower.
Yes.
It's one of the secret superpowers.
Yes.
So it's just like, yes, she grew up, Morna grew up invisible, but how do you use that in your life as a power?
Yes.
As part of your abilities, assets to get through life.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's just like, I don't see it as a negative to have to change it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like, you have to acknowledge in yourself that it's there. It's basically using what you have to get where you need to go.
Yes. Kind of working through. Yeah. And I have to ask if there's any kind of relationship or inspiration with the prologue of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man.
Well, that's a good question. When I would say it's more. When you say that, I think about Toni Morrison more as my influence.
Yes.
Because I remember her talking about how that was written for white people.
Invisible Man.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
And it's just like, she didn't write for white people.
Yes.
So it's hard for me to say, well, no. Because it's just like, I'm telling our story, not for somebody else to understand us. It's for us to grow and for us to tell our stories.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I remember we talked about my personal mandate years ago. I don't know if you remember.
No, let's hear it.
So it's like, empower, educate, and give voice to Canadian Black women and girls and boys by telling our stories. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's my personal mandate. So it's like, everything that I write comes from that.
Yes.
So telling Borno's story is coming from that. Telling Invisible. Sophia, I've got other books, and just they're all coming from that. So, yay, Ralph Ellison, but no.
Yes.
That sounds kind of cocky.
Fair enough.
But no.
Yes. So I feel like it's so helpful to understand how you if you will, create your like literary vision board. So it's like, we can see where you have that initial spark, and then what you do, how you kind of collect these pieces to build on that spark and then create a narrative. Okay. And so it's good to hear that. And now it would be amazing if we could maybe look at a few exercises that you use to like kind of get into that.
Well, we can, I think my apartment's interesting. There's always stuff to look at.
Yes.
But I mean, you can go to a coffee shop. You can go to the train station. You can walk downtown and just sit there and just write what you see. So we can just start here. We can just get some paper, look around, and then we'll do some exercises from what we see.
Okay, excellent. Let's do this.
All right. So we'll do like 5 minutes.
Okay, so this is a 5 minute write
5 minutes,
just what we see.
Whatever you see. Orange book.
Okay.
Whatever it is you see, and it doesn't really matter what you see. I'll show you how to work with what you got. So, you've written a bunch of stuff.
Yes.
And then you take one of them, and then we'll do an exercise.
So one thing that I saw?
Yeah, so...
Perfect.
You just pick one, and then what you do is, for example, I have striped chair, blue bottle, glass bus, open velvet curtains, stickers on fridge. You take one of them, and I'm going to pick timer stuck in time.
Okay.
So you put timer stuck in time.
Okay.
And then your next sentence has to start with time. Timer stuck in time. Time is elusive. Elusive is whatever. And you just doesn't have to make sense. You just keep going, keep going, keep going.
Okay. Almost like dreams don't make sense, but there's one thing from the last scene that shows up in the next
That's
scene.
Right.
And there are these transitions that don't make any sense, but just
keep writing.
Okay. Okay.
And then you take that, when you're done with that, you're going to take one of those lines and write a little short story.
Okay.
So that's the writing exercise.
Yes.
So it's like you're starting with nothing.
Yes.
Or just little tiny things. You're making it just a flow.
Okay.
And then from that flow, you take and you write a little blurb.
Okay. Okay.
I'll read mine because it's
Okay.
doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
Just to show you that you're not making a paragraph.
Okay.
You're not. It can be silly. It doesn't make sense. You're just writing.
Perfect.
Just letting it out.
Okay.
We're stuck in time. Time slips away from me. Me and my friends always have fun together. Together is good, but alone time is my favorite. Favorite is a personal choice. Choice, belief of a bunch of things. Things happen and we don't always have a choice of when. When I'm alone, I think a lot. Lots of alone time makes me happy.
Yes.
It doesn't flow, it doesn't make
Yes.
sense, whatever. So I would do is pull something out of there and write a story
Perfect.
based on whatever.
Perfect.
Doesn't have to be true.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't know what's true in here,
Yeah,
what's
doesn't
not.
need to be perfect.
Right.
Release that word.
No, because nobody's gonna read this. This
Yes.
is just to get your mind going and thinking and free.
Okay.
Right.
So the next part of this is that we take one sentence.
That's your topic sentence.
Got it.
And
Okay.
then you write whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I picked things happened and we don't always have a choice of when. I was a happy 8-year-old. I was a happy child when I was 8. I'd eat cereal for breakfast, my favorite kind that goes snap, crackle, pop. And then catch the school bus. Then one day there was a new kid in the bus and she sat in my seat. I always sit in the second seat. It's mine. Everyone knows this. I sat next to the new girl and she said hi. She was sweet and nice and she gave me a cookie. From that day, she became my best friend. Her name is Sarah.
So beautiful. And I'm with you on that bus. And I had that feeling.
I got issues too.
You know? I love it.
But it's what am I going to do with this? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's,
Yeah. Yeah.
I made something up.
Yeah.
Well,
It feels like a beautiful opening. And
Yeah.
I'm also like very much intrigued. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
You could, you could keep going on it. You take parts of it.
okay.
Whatever. You're
So
ready.
it's like someone could even go back, choose a different sentence, write another thing, and then maybe there's something
It
that.
has nothing to do with Sarah.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like, Sarah didn't exist until this paragraph.
I
Right?
love that.
So it gets you writing, it gets you thinking, it gets you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Okay.
So this is just how, like, when I'm not writing, how to
Okay.
get back into the mode, how to get back into the thought process.
Okay.
So you could take whatever your story's about, do some point form. My story's about this. My story's about this. My
Okay.
story's about this. Take it, do that exercise.
Okay. Okay.
Take it, expand on one of the characters. Once you're writing, it's easier to write. Right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Right. And then from there, it's like you said, it's easier to write when you're writing. It's
Right.
easier to choreograph when you're dancing.
Yes.
It's easier to create an installation when you're like making and
The zone.
you've got that kind of like understanding of what it's about, and then you're just playing.
And words are powerful. Seeing written words is powerful. Like a big chalkboard, you just write it out. Write it out, step by step by step.
Yeah.
Okay. It just shows you your pattern.
There was something that you said, Sarah didn't exist until a minute ago.
Right.
And so that just made me think about character development. And I remember you sharing the
some
image.
Of the props.
Yeah.
So the father in my book is Mateus.
Yes.
Lynette was easy for me as a queer person to imagine her, to find her voice.
Yes.
She's not me, but a lot of things are me.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because it's not that far of a stretch.
Yes.
Borno I could understand. The son I could understand. Mateus, other than hot man. Who is this man? Right?
Right.
He was also a police officer in Spain. Like,
interesting.
Just, yeah. And so it's like, I needed to find him.
Yeah.
So I wandered around. I ended up thinking that, excuse me, I don't know if we should chill it.
Yeah.
He smokes. So then I had to run around, and it's just like, I just sit here sometimes with my cigar. I don't smoke. I don't smoke, but this feels, you can hold my cigar.
Thank you.
Right? Like, it's a different feeling.
It's a tangible way of embodying
smell.
Mateus.
Like, the smell. It's a different kind of smell, and it's a different kind of, and it's like, he smokes.
Yeah.
He smokes.
And now you can feel the story, you can smell the story.
I can know who he is.
You move the story.
Yeah, I can move like him. I drive with it out the window. It hangs in your mouth.
Yes.
It's like, it's just a prop.
Yeah.
But it's like I learned who he is, and I thought about who he is and who he would be, and who would be the man to marry this bisexual woman from Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Very interesting.
Yeah. So again, the props and the, just trying to find out who he was and to give him a fair shake.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to like him.
Yes. Do you find that when you write stories, you want there to be that, do you want all of the characters to be liked?
No. They gotta be human.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. I mean, no, it can't be.
Yeah.
It can't be because that's not human. You don't like everything. I like everything about you. That's but you don't like everything about everybody, right?
Yes.
Like there's things that you don't like because everybody is different.
Yes.
Right? So, and it's a story. I want people to read it. There has to be a conflict.
Yes.
There's no conflict. There's no story. Like,
so
sit around and happy all day. Well, that's great to live, but that's not great to read and to see. There has to be a conflict.
And it's kind of like the story that you told at the beginning of being in this cafe in Morocco.
Yeah.
And there were characters that came in that I didn't like.
Right.
Like, I didn't like the friends that Borno is with, or at this time Bonet is with.
Yes.
Yeah. And then it makes me think, not so much that you want all of your characters to be liked. Do you want them to be understood in some way? Like, do you dig into the past of, say, the characters of these women that are shutting Bonet out, or do you concentrate on your...
Because I want them to be human.
Okay.
I would say yes. Who is this girl? Why is she jealous of her? All these things. But that doesn't show up as words. That shows up as subtlety.
Yes.
Because she's not, the girl that was jealous, she's not a monster.
Yes.
She's not a monster.
Yes.
All these things that she grew up, how she grew up, to make her... So me just knowing that on paper feeds. So you don't have to show it, but it's there.
Okay. Everybody's
human. So you have to make... I want humans. I don't want...
And I love that, like, play with, like, understanding something as a superpower, but also the humanity of it all.
Yeah.
And okay, so I'm kind of wondering if you can lead us through like a character development exercise.
So we talked about the girl who was mean to Borno.
Yes.
Why don't we do her?
Okay.
Who's her mother?
Okay.
Who's her father? Where did she grow up?
Okay.
What's her favorite color?
Got it. So essentially,
Does she
it's
have
like
a boyfriend? Does she want a boyfriend? Everything.
Okay.
Everything you can think of.
Okay.
She's probably about 19.
Okay.
Why don't we do it?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I named her Peggy.
I get.
2 parents, a man and a woman. She's blonde. Has a perfect older sister that she wants to be like. Boyfriend who she should be with. Who everybody thinks she should be with. Good grades, but she struggles. Doesn't understand her privilege. Thinks life is hard, easier for others. Works hard for others to believe she is the best. Wants a husband, 2 kids, to be a stay-at-home mom. Perfection is important.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So
wonderful.
That's how we do it, right?
Yes. Yes.
So none of this would be in the story. None of this. But when you're writing her dialogue, when you're writing her facial expressions, this is the person. So we wrote the person, which would feed the dialogue. Made them human. What would they say? Because deep down she's insecure.
Yes.
And why is she insecure? She's, she wants to be your older sister. She can never be perfect like her big sis. So when she sees Borno, who seems to have it easy, who is actually prettier than her, and nicer than her, and she'd love to be her.
Yeah.
But she could never tell her that.
I like this.
Yeah.
So then, like when you talk about like this as an exercise, and then the way that you bring Mateus to life.
Right.
Would you then, for example, is this something that you just kind of understand, like she's a minor character you understand as background or backdrop for the dialogue, but then when you go into an embodiment exercise, is that for main characters or
you could do this for everybody?
Okay.
Right? He's more of an A character. You actually need to know him a bit better.
Yeah.
Right? But it's all the same. You could go out and find her t-shirt or her room or draw her room or do whatever you needed to do.
Yeah.
For him, I wanted to be fair to him because I didn't want him to be flat. I need him to be a human. So it's all the same. I could do this with him and make all the points for him.
Okay.
I was in the library and I was thinking about him. I knew he smoked. I had to find a cigar. And does it make sense? No.
Okay.
But it made my day.
Yes.
And it's also a good thing to do when you're stuck. So if I'm writing it and I'm stuck, you need to do more work.
Yes.
You need to find out who he is.
So you have these characters.
Yeah.
From that, I know where the characters are. I know what their space. Like I'm beginning to understand like how I would conceive of how what their space looks like. And I get like maybe it's more important for us to stick to the character, but part of me is like, how do you decide the very general story
what the story is about?
Do you is there an exercise that you have for that, which is just kind of like roughly getting folks?
It's hard to do because you don't want to stick to it.
Got it. Okay.
You gotta let the story be the story.
Okay.
So in the beginning, I have I should have brought a chalkboard. You have
Borno and the bar here, and I thought about where in her life would that go?
Right.
And it's not. I'm not telling her whole life.
Yes. Yes.
Where in the story would it go?
Yeah. Okay.
So then I go back to, I do all these point forms. Let's without going into detail of your story.
Yeah.
You know your story, so I'm going to get you to go to the dollar store.
Okay.
And is it a child? Is it an adult? Buy something she'll like or he'll like.
Okay.
Just something you can hold.
Yes.
Something that makes you happy. Something that's not Kenny's, that's hers.
Okay.
And so go somewhere and buy something she likes.
Yeah. So it's like an object or an embodiment exercise.
You follow whatever it is. So that's also important, is to take your character on an artist date.
Yeah.
Where do they want to go?
Yes.
Just try and imagine how they would feel in this.
Where do they want to go? What do they
right.
want to do? And I guess, what was one of the things, like, when you were speaking, part of me could almost imagine just planting a seed for the future. A blueprint for the future, if you will. But like this scenario where there's like a group of us that come together and each of us can take people from a scene.
Yeah.
And write the background for that.
It's fantastic
character.
for that.
I would love to do that sometime.